Dhanush.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. As Dhanush introduced, my name is Rohini. I'm from CDD Society, Bangalore. I also have my colleague here, Sanjay, who will be, helping me to facilitate this session. To start, just to introduce my organization, we come from CDD Society. It's based in Kengeri, satellite town. We are an NGO, work with different partners across India. We mainly work in different sectors of wastewater, water body, fecal sludge, solid waste management, working in different capacities like technical consultancy, capacity building, applied research and knowledge management, and publication. So this is a small background about our organization. To start, what I want to do is that I have my colleague here who will be posting a link for a question. So it's basically called a Mentimeter, where there'll be a link is provided. You can open your chat. There is a link and there is a question also. Maybe you can answer it. So to start or to understand your background or how much you already know. So it helps us to start the session. Sanjay, is that there? So are all of you able to see the link? Maybe you can just go to that link and then put your answers there.
Yeah, we just received the link. Thank you. Yeah.
Sanjay, how many answers do we have?
11.
Okay, 11. We can wait for some more. Okay, is it audible? Yeah, thanks. We'll wait for a few more answers, then we can start the session. Nitrogen, vitamins, sodium. Okay, the question is here. The list out 2 or 3 elements of the nutrients. Nitrogen and phosphorus, yeah. Okay, nitrates, correct. In PK. Okay, microbes. Microbes are not the nutrients. Correct, sodium. Calcium. Yeah. Yeah, I think most of you have answered this. We have one more question. Just to start, the same way, there'll be another link where you can go and answer it. So now, Sanjay, can you share the link? So in the link, if you go where you can answer, you can see also question and then you can also answer. Yeah, now the link is there. Everybody got the question? The question is that what are the effects of excess nutrients in water body? So in the screen, you can able to see, the answers, others, what they have given. As this text become bigger, that means many people are answering the same. Okay, thank you everyone for your answers. We'll now go to the session. Yeah, so this particular session we'll be talking about water and the presence of nutrients. So let's understand what is nutrients. As all of you know, nutrients are nothing but they are fuel of life. So nutrients are required for all organisms to need to live and grow. So when you look at nutrients, 95 to 98%, the carbon, hydrogen, and oxygens are the major portion of the nutrients. But there are also small, other nutrients like what we broadly divided into macronutrients and micronutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, magnesium. So there are different nutrients that are existing in an atmosphere which help for the organisms to grow. When you look at it, as I said, nutrients, how is it getting circulated? So look, just this picture represents the nutrient cycle. So basically where this nutrient comes from. So these nutrients are, like from the water and air, it gets penetrate to the soil. The organic matter or the plant matter that with the presence in the earth will fall onto the earth. So this gets mixed in the soil. It gets decomposes because of the microbe present in the soil. There are different set of microorganisms that are present in the soil. They just, decomposes all this organic matter, which converts into a easy form of nutrient, which can be uptaken by these plants. Once the plants start uptaking these nutrients from the soil, they actually grow and they give yield. So that will be again eaten up by the human being, and then we'll have, we will also create some kind of nutrients like our urine or feces also has a lot of nutrients, right? So that's again where it goes. Again, it goes to the soil. So this is a circle where you see it starts from somehow from the atmosphere, goes to the soil. Again, it comes back to, different circles. So this is like, it's not just one time activity. It is a permanent circulation happens in nature to which converts the nutrient in a different form that is required for the organisms for their growth. So let's, because we're talking about water, let's look at this. There is a water cycle, there is a nutrient cycle. I hope most of you know how this water cycle is there. And there is also nutrient cycle. Today, what is happening is that the nutrient cycle is somehow broken. That means where exactly is that this portion. So once it gets digestion, it is not again going back to the cycle and which is feeding to the plants. That is not happening. So it gets directed towards the water bodies or to the water cycle. It gets interfere with the water cycle. That means when I talk about water, it's nothing but our surface water. It could be any form of water, like it's a pond or lake, anything. So it is from the digestion portion, it is directly discharged into a water body, which creates the pollution of the water. And what we are doing, so because nutrients are going into the water, we don't have nutrient that is required for a plant. So we go with an external fertilizer. We take a lot of chemical-based fertilizer and then we are discharging into the soil. In other way around, we are just polluting the water body and then again we are treating the water. So we are just polluting ourselves and then again treating it by investing a lot of money on treatment, and also in the other side it is getting fertilizers being made. So when you look at it, what I hear a conclusion is that both water and nutrient cycle get mixed up, and it is creating a lot of issues around the water bodies or even in the environment. Very specific to aquatic ecosystem, this is a study that is done by WRI, Water Resource Institute. What they talk about is this: many of our coastal areas, like if you look at this map, it provides a lot of ocean coastal area. Majority of this coastal area has an issues of accumulation of high phosphorus and nitrogen presence in the water body. When there is a presence of phosphorus nitrogen, this leads to an uncontrolled growth of an algae. Once algae is there, as all of you know, there is decreases the oxygen that is required for other microorganisms. So because of that, what happens? It creates a dead zone. Means once there is a dead zone, means there is no nutrient, there is no oxygen for other organisms to grow or live. Hence, it's become a dead zone. So this is the representation which you can see. There are like the red represents the orange one represents which are eutrophic in nature. That means it's completely dead in nature. There are hypoxic, which is where there is still presence of DO, but there are some green, you will say, where it is getting actually recovered. So these water bodies have been, some interventions are done and it is getting recovered. This is very, I would say, very old data, but I'm pretty sure there may be some updated, which we can also show a lot of this orange and red dots even in India also. So as I said, what happens when there is a heavy nutrients and there is a release of nutrients? These are some pictures that are actually, we have got it from different newspapers. I think you all know there is a lot of foam. There is, there is an algal bloom that has formed because of there is a dead fishes. So when there is an excessive nitrogen, as all of you said, when there is a excessive nitrogen is released into water body, there is a eutrophication, there is a decrease in the DO. The other organism like fish or any aquatic ecosystem will die. So it's become completely in a dead aquatic system, so dead water bodies. So when you look at this picture, for us commonly what it comes is that what is the sources? Why these lakes are getting nutrients? From where these nutrients are coming out? So what we do is that we also have one Mentimeter question. So maybe you can just go to that link. I'm just closing my. You can also post it. So you all can also see a link in the chat. You can go and then just put your answers. So what we are saying, what are the sources of nutrients in wastewater? Most of us know that for water bodies, the major source of nutrients are wastewater. Then where this wastewater gets these nutrients? What are the sources of nutrients? So we have a question. Maybe you can start answering to that. The question says that what are the sources of nutrients for wastewater? There are also some answers in the chat box which says domestic sewage, agricultural runoff, industrial effluents, chemical effluents from cottage industries. There are also some answers for detergents, household waste, chicken waste, macrophytes, garbage and other waste, household water. So, but if you look at it, there are two bigger reasons or sources of nutrients is the sewage and industrial waste. That was also coming up in most of your answers. So thanks, Sanjay. We can close it now and we can go back to our session. Yeah. So as most of you said, even for domestic wastewater, where this nutrient comes from. So even in our urine and feces, if you look at it, urine has a lot of especially the nitrogen component and phosphorus components are very high in urine. So that's a major sources of the nutrients. Soaps and detergent, whatever that we use, as most of you said, it's also a fertilizer that is applied on the field. These are the key sources for nutrients, and that is for that comes in our wastewater. So now we said there are a lot of wastewater, right? Let's look at it how that is happening. Like how is this nutrients are removed? There are varieties of technologies or wastewater treatment plants that are available to treat this sewage to remove the nutrients. In 2015, also from 2015 to 2018, a FOREST project was done, which is mainly to assess the different technologies to see the performance of these technologies in a different aspect. This is a graph which actually shows different technology. Like you can see at the bottom, there are like SBR, MBBR, ASP. These are different wastewater technologies that are actually studied to see whether these technologies are able to treat or able to reduce the total nitrogen content in the effluent. But if you look at it, majority of the systems are, or I would say very few systems are able to reduce the total nitrogen content. If you look at it as per the standards that is provided, right? For an effluent that is just discharged from an STP, it says it should be less than 10 mg per liter. So that's this line that you see in the bottom. Most of these technologies are not able to meet. I should not say most of technology is not able to meet. It's also because these technologies are primarily designed to treat COD, BOD, that is the majorly carbon portion. These technologies are not actually designed to remove nutrients. So because the nutrients require an additional modules or additional process to be added in order to remove the nutrients. Hence, this study also concludes that current existing systems, right, which are operations, are not able to meet the required standards that is provided by the Central Pollution Control Board. Now, what we will do is that we also have other things, like now we saw what is happening currently. We also have different options that are available to remove the nutrients. So I'll pass on to my colleague Sanjay. He will be also explaining what are the different technologies that are available to remove the nutrients from wastewater that is going into the STP, to the lakes. Sanjay, you can start.
Right. Hello everyone, myself Sanjay. I'm an engineer at CDD Society. I'll take you through the presentation on various treatment systems or conventional treatment system plus the advanced or newly developed systems where how can we remove the nutrients. Now, as Rohini explained to you earlier, that most of the systems are not designed to treat it. So I believe there are like very limited experience. My personal experience plus experience as a whole Bharat, like engineers from whole Bharat, that we don't know much. We don't know much about on say personal experience is not much. It's mainly based upon the secondary research. So now I'll start with my presentation. So here the whole flow of presentation will go from first the processes of nutrient removal. So mainly we have two nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus. So we'll try to look at how the chemical or physical process happens for removal of nitrogen, and similar as for the phosphorus. Other nutrients are really in a low amount in the wastewater, and there are not specific standards, or we can say at the moment those are not a concern, not a problem, like they have not been considered as a problem currently. And then secondly, the processes and technologies will go hand in hand, where we will try to see that in conventional STPs how it can be treated, then through wetlands how it can be treated, and there are several methods through algae which are giving promising results on a laboratory scale plus pilot scale. And then at the end we'll also try to have a look at several studies that what's the self-cleansing capacity of lake, and what the result says about it. Now, starting with the processes, first one is about nitrogen. So the nutrient cycle you have seen in the earlier slides. Here, just try to let's have a focus on the, let's say, nitrogen, the main gas which is there in the atmosphere. It whenever we try to look at the nitrogen in wastewater, it comes in the inlet as a form of ammonia. It can be NH3 or NH4 based upon the temperature and pH. The first process which happens is nitrification, where ammonia converts into nitrate and nitrite, NO2 and NO3. And this process requires oxygen. It's an aerobic process. So that's the first step. And second step which happens is the denitrification process. So it also happens through a bacteria, but it don't require oxygen. And this process actually takes place in the anoxic zone. So there's also something called as anaerobic, which lots of you might be knowing, or we can, like, at the moment we won't indulge much into the technicalities, but you can search by your own about the anoxic and anaerobic processes. So here we can understand, like, these are the two-step process, and this is the conventional process that people know about the nitrogen, much explored one. But there is a one more process, that's a one-step process, which also goes directly from ammonia to nitrogen, and that we call as Anna-Mox process. It's on a lab scale and pilot scale. These studies have been done. There are some few projects which are done on a live scale also, but it's not as popular technology, and there is a lot to be learned. In terms of operations, maintenance, and sustainability of the system. Now, for the conventional STPs, as we talked about the anoxic and Anna-Mox process, that you have to include within the system. So the anoxic, if you like, see, there was a two-step. First one was aerobic process, second anoxic process. Aerobic systems, most of our systems have aerobic process. The STPs, MBBR system, ASP, SBR. There you have to add just one more process where there is an anoxic zone. So oxygen is not available there, and denitrification happens. And in some anaerobic processes, or most of the anaerobic process have tertiary or post-secondary treatment as aerobic. So along with that aerobic system, you can include the anoxic system to have the nitrification and denitrification processes, that two-step approach. If you want to go for a one-step approach, then the Anna-Mox processes can be included. This whole thing can be done as a individual additional tanks, or within the same tanks you can play with the oxygen levels and hydraulic flows. Now let's move to the second aspect of phosphorus removal. So as we discussed about the nitrogen, there's a simple two options to remove it. But when we talk about phosphorus, there are various, it's a bit complex process, we can say. So now to simplify it, I would say that first process is physical process through filtration. So that can be normal filters or membranes, MBR system, where along with your solids, phosphorus also gets removed. Then secondly, it's about mixing an additional agent within the water, which will be either a chemical agent or it can be a biological microorganism community that will stick with, they will have a chemical or biochemical process along with the phosphorus, and that will settle down, or in other words, we can say it as it will precipitate, and then you can remove that precipitated or settled sludge from your tanks, and that way the wastewater treatment can happen. Now, when we talk about the chemicals, you should focus upon these three items: calcium, aluminum, and ions. So these all ions are able to have chemical reactions with the phosphorus, phosphate as a form of phosphorus, and so the elements which have this kind of ions like lime, alum, ferric chloride, we add that into the wastewater and get it treated. And similar processes, we also try to have the similar process in wetlands that we'll explain in the later part. Second is biological process, which I said, it's actually a culture of microorganism culture. They have to add into the water, and then like everything will get precipitated or settled as a sludge that can be removed through the sludge handling systems. Now moving forward to wetlands. So here in the wetland, as we earlier said, that you need to design it. You need to design wetlands for nutrient removal. Mostly the wetlands, when you design, we try to design it for BOD or COD removal. That will be done in a smaller area. When you have to design it for nitrogen removal or phosphorus removal, your area might increase to twice, or maybe sometimes 10 times more. And it is not just about increasing the area. You have to also alter the hydraulic flows and aeration. So just to to have a link to this aeration and hydraulic flow, this is directly linked to nitrification and denitrification processes, where you try to create through hydraulic flow or physical aeration to have the aerobic process, the nitrification, and then you develop a zone where there is not oxygen is not available, an anoxic process happens and your nitrogen gets removed. So this is normally happening in a vertical flow wetlands. Vertical flow wetland, here as you can see in the diagram, you have the filter media. From above you have distribution network where the water will go, water will come from this, and at the end it will be collected at the bottom through these pipes and it will go out. Now while this flow happens vertically, the hydraulic flow is not continuous. There are different thumb rules based on that you can design it. We design it with 10 minutes as an inlet, and then 1 hour 50 minutes there won't be any inlet. So by that time water will or you can say it will settle through and accumulate at the bottom area. So when the water will all the voids will be dry at that time, and second time when the load will come in the voids, whatever the air or oxygen which would have been present there, that will be trapped because of new oxygen, new water coming from the top. And that oxygen which has been trapped within the voids, that will interact with the wastewater. So that's where your first process, aerobic nitrification process, will happen, and that oxygen will be consumed. So that's how you will design the void capacity and vertical flow wetland. That after some time, your water will also pass through an anoxic zone. That's where your denitrification process will happen, and you will be able to remove the nitrogens. And that's why these vertical flow wetlands are able to provide us really good results in terms of nitrogen removal. Secondly, we also called something called as a intensified wetlands. This is a new concept. It's being developed since last few years. Here, wetlands have been integrated along with aerations. It can be horizontal flow wetlands, vertical flow wetland, even the hybrid wetlands, where in the initial tank from where the water gets pumped, you provide aeration, or within the system, within your wetlands, you provide aeration and try to develop those zones which will help you to remove the nitrogen. But this system has the intensified wetlands. I was not able to see any implementation or even the pilot or lab scale studies within India. So if you're able to see any or get to know about anyone, I would be really interested to know about these intensified wetlands. Now, moving to the second component, the phosphorus. So for phosphorus, as I said you earlier, to remember the calcium, aluminum, and iron. So based upon these three elements, you should select filter media. So here, as you can see, this filter media where the water will pass through. And this kind of media is available: steel slag, seashells, fly ash, different medias are there. And as I said, like this nutrient removal kind of mechanisms, those all studies are on the pilot scale or lab scale. So we have to, like, in upcoming years, maybe next 3-4 years or maybe the next decade, we will have a strong systems where we can rely upon them and put them into installation for larger capacities. And here, through these different materials, we are not sure that what other implication can it have. It might in your operation maintenance system, or it can have how long this steel slag or say seashell will be able to absorb phosphorus. What will be its life? So those all values you have to determine and also see through our experience that how better we are able to design it. Now, some say innovative technology we can say. And there is a lot of research getting done on the algae. And here in our South India context, Mr. T. Sampath Kumar have put one case study on the CSE India website, where his product Neo Algae, he says it to add as a 1 kg per acre of a lake per week. And when you add it, it will cause a bloom of diatom algae. That diatom algae, it looks like normal all the algae, and it's really robust one. It can work in the saline water, normal fresh water, and even the mixed kind of water it can survive. For the wastewater also it will survive. And this diatom algae, this diatom algae will reduce our organics as well as nutrients, and even it can also it can also consume several heavy metals. So that way it works really well in terms of reducing the pollutants. And and then this diatom algae will be consumed by zooplanktons. These are really small microorganisms, and those are being normally consumed by fishes. Now this now this system, it seems really beautiful in a way that ecological cycle is taking care of the all systems, but we have to look through and critically evaluate it, like what's the amount of diatom algae that produces every day, how much is it being eaten consumed by zooplanktons, and how much zooplanktons are being consumed by fishes, how that whole balance thing works out, and is there any side effects of the system where in the operational maintenance side what we have to look into it. Now, so that's with this system. Now moving to one more system of algae. It's a normally it's famous as microalgae based STPs or wastewater treatment systems, where they try to create several tanks where you have an algae. Mostly these are prepared with glass or fibers, transparent fibers, where you allow sunlight to penetrate through the wastewater, and this will algae will consume the organic matter, nutrients, and even hazardous chemicals, and even the pathogens are also reduced. Then the algae which comes here, it's not like the way we mentioned in the last system, it will be that was eaten by zooplanktons. Here we have to physically remove the algae, and that removed algae can be used as a biofuel, fertilizer, or biopolymers. And the main advantage of having these kind of systems in our area, our region, climates like Bharat, that we have a good amount of sunlight exposure for a lot of area, and even we have higher temperatures compared to European standards or American. So that way this system seems promising to our region, but as all other systems, it's in a lab scale to pilot scale level, and we have to look at the operation and maintenance challenges. Now, that's all on the system side. Now let's have a look at what's the self-cleansing capacity happening there. And for that, we have a beautiful case study of Jakkur Lake. This was presented at like 2 days back on webinar by Seema Sukhani from IISc. The study was done by Biome plus IISc and it. Just to let you know about how to look at the graph. Here, all the inlet is from this point 9, and outlets are 1, 2. So it's on say decreasing side. Oh sorry. So now the inlets we can see here 9, 8, and then see how the wastewater gets treated as it goes till the outlet. Now near the 9 point, that's a wetland. And because of several reasons, wetland outlet was having a higher nutrients. But now let's have a look at from point 8 to point 1. That's where we can observe the self-cleansing capacity. Here, one element, the black line, which represents the NH3 and ammonia. So ammonia is getting reduced. And if you remember the nitrogen removal thing, when ammonia reduces, it's a oxygen-based process, a nitrification process that's happening. So that happens very well in the pond. But look at the second thing, NO2N, NO3N. There's some problem to understand like whether it's NO2 or NO3, but yeah, both represent the same scenario that now nitrification has happened. And what's the status of denitrification? If NO3N reduces, it shows that denitrification is happening. If it increases, it means that only first processes happened and now NO3 values are high. And here we can see that NO3 at some point it reduces, but ultimately it's higher than what it was earlier. So we can clearly see that one step of a process is happening, but not the second step. And the same results we were able to find in our CDD study. We had one research on floating islands. where we try to have two ponds. One pond where have inlet and outlets will be there, and second pond we'll put a floating island in between and try to see what additional treatment efficiency or what are the effects of floating island there. So now these first two graphs are for a normal pond, and second two graphs represents the pond with a floating island. The blue line, if you see ammonia, the reduction in terms of ammonia was higher in empty pond without island. When we put an island, the reduction capacity actually reduced. So it shows that oxygen. This whole nitrification process happens in presence of oxygen. And here, if you look at the pond, oxygen happens through surface aeration. So that was taking place very well when you don't have an island. With the floating island, you are covering some part of a lake. It was earlier around 10%. That reduced actually your nitrification capacity. But the positive point of floating island was that. Hello, is there anyone wishing to say something? Okay, we'll continue. On the second side, denitrification process that will be represented by the reduction of NO3N. In the normal pond without island, it was it is minus reduction. So it means NO3 was increasing compared to the inlet concentration. But when we look at the floating island one, we are able to see around 20% reduction. So because of floating island, we were able to develop anoxic zone that helped us to remove nitrogen.
Hello.
Yes, Mr. Rudresh, I think.
Yeah. I have one doubt actually. When you are showing in the graph, nitrogen is also increasing in your second island also. So why can't we go for any other methods instead of this? Because nitrogen is very dangerous, as we all know that. It is a vasodilator when it enters to the biological system. Do you have any other method for removing ammonia? Is okay, denitrification is occurring. But when you're looking at the nitrate, even in the second graph also, the nitrate level is increasing, correct? When you look at the just pond, and apart from that, the second one is also increasing.
So just
whether you are looked into that matter, nitrate, nitrogen, how you are going to do that?
So just to clarify that here, the second graph don't show the concentration; it shows the reduction. So when I tell about the positive 20%, so 20% is a reduction. It's not a concentration. So it is actually reducing, not increasing.
Okay, where actually that nitrogen is absorbed, whether it is in the plants?
So sir, that much we were not able to say examine on the site, but through reference we can say that it goes into two sides. One is that nitrogen which gets released into the atmosphere, and secondly through the plants. These are the only two way it should be happening. But we are not sure about exactly how much percentage is absorbed by plant and how much is releasing to the atmosphere.
That is what we want, because nitrate is a simple molecule, NO3, as we all know that. It is highly chelating molecule. It is high solubility in water. So that's the reason how it is eliminated, whether it is taken by the plants. Just I wanted to have a confirmation with the research part, because they have done some research work. That's the reason I wanted to know, because I work on Bangalore, groundwater nitrate in Bangalore North. That's the reason I wanted to know this part.
Okay, so Mr. Rudresh Kumar, after this conversation, you can get in touch with me. I'll share my contact number in the last slides.
Sure. Thank you.
So I have one of the study I came across where you have all mass balance of nitrogen.
Yeah, nitrate, nitrogen, ammonia, nitrogen, all these things are very dangerous. That's the reason.
Sure.
Okay,
looking at the time, we'll move a bit faster. So here we can clearly say that water body have a self-cleansing capacity in terms of ammonia removal, nitrification, but it cannot remove the nitrate, the second step. So that's where we have to come with some interventions to increase the lake's capacity to do the denitrification. Now, second thing, looking at the phosphorus. So here in the lake, as we see from 8, it will be inlet to the lake and 1 outlet of the lake. And we were able to, we can easily observe that phosphorus is getting removed here. And same thing we were able to see in our study, that when we had a pond it was able to reduce till certain extent, say around 40%. But when we have a floating island, it was able to increase the capacity by around 10% to 50%. So it clearly, there can be a statement that water body has a self-cleansing capacity in terms of phosphate removal. Now, putting everything together, I can conclude here that nutrients, as we initially talked about nutrient cycle, this is an essential resource for our food cycle and plus day-to-day activities for humans, animals, and even the plants or whole nature. But the mismanagement that we do with the nutrient, that makes it end up into the water body, and that's where we have to come with new fertilizers and have a heavy investment on the wastewater treatment systems. So as a solution, as an approach, the first thing would be to reduce wastewater, to reduce that nutrient at the source level only. So when you have the urine diversion toilets are there, that can be utilized, or that we can look at different approaches to see that directly how we can put that urine as a fertilizers. Secondly, as a recycle. So that's where algae will come as a algae will play a role. Then wetland based farming can be done there, where the nutrients will be directly going to the wetland, and it will produce some farming several, say, non-consumable kind of products, so that any harmful effect cannot come back to our system. And then third one can be like, if we are not able to reduce or not able to recycle, so at that moment we should go for the removing. And there are technically proven technologies are there which can be integrated into our systems, and we should be going for removing the removing the nitrogen and phosphorus from our wastewater. So that's all from our side. Is there any questions you can address to me or Rohini now?